Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have with me another very special guest, Marti MacEwan. How are you, Marti?
I'm great. Good morning for me and what? Good evening for you?
No, it's not evening. It's still noon. Yeah,
Ah,
it's
okay.
afternoon. It's four o'clock for all
Ah,
those punctuators out there. Uh,
right. No, it's really it's the early morning hours on the west coast of the United States here.
yeah, that's an important piece of information, of course. But we have a lot of topics to talk about and cover. So, can you talk about, a little bit about what you do?
I sure can. I specialize in helping people get over their stage fright, fear of public speaking, performance anxiety, and what they call the impostor syndrome, which is the feeling that you don't deserve to be doing what you're doing. And it can really all of those variations of stage fright, in my definition, all of those can so get in people's way in terms of being able to comfortably do what they either need to do or want to do in front of other people, whether it's performing musically or acting or writing a blog, making a presentation at work. All of those things are getting up in front of someone and presenting information or presenting your talents. Um, And if you have a fear of it, it can really not only uh, make you uncomfortable, but also it can ruin your performance, whatever that performance might be, or even keep you from doing something important to you that you really want to do. So, my passion is to help people be free of that fear so they can go ahead comfortably with what it is they want to do.
Yeah, so can you tell me what are some of the main reasons that someone will have a stage fright? I know we're not psychologists, and I'm not an expert in those kinds of areas. I'm not a scientist, at least, and not
Mhm.
a social kind of a scientist. So, what are some of the reasons, some of the um, most popular or most spread reasons for having some kind of stage fright?
Well, yeah, my definition for stage fright is the fear of doing anything for someone else's consideration or enjoyment. So the I guess if you want to really pare it down to the most common denominator, it's that the fear of feeling our own uncomfortable feelings, such like rejection or humiliation or embarrassment, or we're afraid of some negative consequence of doing what we're wanting to do. And our brain, part of our brain goes into kind of a fight, flight, or freeze response because the situation feels threatening for some reason, right? And that fight, flight, or freeze response can take all kinds of forms. Um, the so the fight, flight, or freeze response is really the common denominator. But the reason any individual person has that response is very unique and individual. A lot of people have it because they had some experiences in their early history that make it aversive, if you will, to be up in front of people and be seen. Even just the act of being seen by other people can trigger that fight, flight, or freeze response. Many of my clients across the spectrum of what they do or what level they're at with their skills and ability maybe were bullied when they were younger or had some, in my case, like a humiliating experience that my brain then associated um, with pain, with emotional pain. And I certainly don't want to feel that again. So my body goes into a threat mode whenever I'm confronting something similar. So my answer to your question, unfortunately, isn't just to put everybody in one box because, but there is a common denominator, and part of my work with people is to figure out in each individual case what it is that's triggering that fight, flight, or freeze response in those kind of situations.
Yeah, so there some kind of a, I don't know, a packaged solution or a one shot kind of a, I don't know, resolve for these kinds of issues, or does it take a long process of working with the other person, kind of a regimented things that they need to do in order to be able to perform and to present themselves and talk?
Yeah, I've actually kind of, if you say package, I kind of packaged it into kind of 4 aspects of what needs to happen. And I have a very different approach than most folks in terms of helping people. There's 4 elements, if you will, or aspects of what a person needs to do in order to overcome. And by overcome, I don't mean just manage. Lots of people talk about managing their stage fright, but I'm talking about really, really calming that fight, flight, or freeze response that I'm talking about, which is the heart racing and the sweaty palms and the worried thoughts and the, oh God, get me out of here feeling, you know. And those 4 elements are these. One, it's important that somebody get objective about it instead of subjective about it. Usually when people have stage fright, it's just these feelings that come over you, and it's just, you don't know where they're coming from, and you don't know why you have them, or what's happening, or what to do about them. And it's just this wave of fear. And that's the subjective experience. But it's really important to get objective about it. In other words, to understand where it's coming from, understand that it's a triggered response, that the brain is sending out signals to the body that it needs to go into this fight, flight, or freeze mode, that it's not something that's wrong with your personality. It's not a character flaw, right? It's not a weakness. You weren't born with it. Certainly some people are more extroverted than it, and some people are more introverted, but stage fright itself is not something that you're born with. And so to get more objective about what it is that's going on is the first step in getting over it, rather than just being overtaken by it and not knowing what to do. And then the second step is to notice when you get triggered and when you don't get triggered. When does that fight, flight, or freeze response happen, and when doesn't it happen? Does it happen only when you're in front of a large group? Does it happen only when you're among friends, just your own friends? Does it happen only when you're with strangers, or is it only when it's a business conversation and not some other kind of, there are things to learn about each individual's patterns of where they're triggered into fear and where they're not triggered into fear. So, and then using that information, we can create a sense of safety for the brain, not for the person, because usually people know that there's really nothing scary about the situation. It's really an emotional, kind of irrational emotional response than a rational logical response. So to use the information about where your brain gets triggered into that fight or flight response can help us figure out ways to create safety in a situation, either by reframing it mentally, or by rearranging the space, or by preparation. All of those kinds of practical ways that there are to create safety for your brain. But it's important to know that what you're doing is working with your own brain, not blaming yourself for some weakness.
Yeah.
But the next 2 elements are to use some very specific techniques that I've developed to break that mind-body response, the fight, flight, or freeze response, so that you don't have that feeling in the first place. In other words, you get up in front of people and sing, and your body isn't going nuts. Your heart rate isn't going, and your sweaty palms and your fear response isn't happening. So there's really nothing to manage because there's no fear response happening. And I think that's where my approach is different than some other people's approaches, because I'm actually going for that fight, flight, or freeze response and dismantling it and disconnecting it from the situation so that people don't have those symptoms anymore.
Yeah. So are there, like you mentioned, there are a lot of people who suggest a lot of different techniques. So are there kind of practical techniques that you can apply while speaking so you don't find yourself in a trap, shall we say, and get back to that fight or flight kind of visceral mode? Yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact, usually people have stage fright not while they're speaking sometimes, but it usually happens before they're speaking, right? One of my clients, as I'm remembering, was an executive, very high level executive, and he would be miserable for like a month before he had to get up and give a presentation, especially if it was a large group. For him, if it was a small group, it was fine. But the larger the group, the more the fear. And we did figure out why that was. But what I suggested for him was a set of exercises that actually activates the vagus nerve, which is the calm down part of our nervous system. And one of the things to do is to match your wrists together like this. Yeah. And then just put your arms right on your waistline. And when you breathe, breathe in through your nose and a long out breath through your mouth. So your hands are like this, right on your waistline, and it's breathe in. And the long out breath. And I remember one time I was going to give a speech. I was standing out in the wings, so to speak, and my heart started to go like this. And I did that. I just leaned kind of casually up against the door jamb, put my hands right here on my wrist, and just did that breathing, like a short in breath through the nose and a long out breath through the mouth. And at the same time, thinking about relaxing all of the muscles that you can find to relax, especially your shoulders. You know, when we get into a fight, flight, or freeze, we tend to hunch up our shoulders and brace ourselves for whatever's coming. But doing this breathing, letting your shoulders drop, letting go of any muscles in your face or your hips or your legs that you don't need in order to be able to stand there where you are, can actually reverse that revving up, you know, and start to let your whole body calm down. And then once your body starts to calm down, then your brain can go, oh, I guess this is okay. I guess I'm going to be okay, right? Instead of like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. They're going to hate me. All of that. And so it's about reversing the revving up in whatever way you can to let yourself settle down. And then your body will follow and your brain will follow and you'll be much more comfortable.
Yeah, so let's try to do a little demonstration. When I get up on stage one of these days, maybe, perhaps, and yeah, where do I have to look? Is there some place I need to focus my attention on so I won't be nervous about the large crowd that is gathering around? Is there what should I do to ensure my security in myself, shall we say?
The first thing is to not believe your feelings. In other words, if you're standing off stage, you're about to go on and you're feeling and your body's revved up, what you need to do is to in a sense, ignore that. In a sense, be objective about it in the sense of, oh, I get it. This is my body responding to the situation. It doesn't mean anything. It's just my body responding to the situation. And then where you do want to put your attention is on what it is you want to offer these people, and to recognize that this is not a massive crowd of 400 people. This is 400 individual people. So you've already hopefully prepared what it is that you're going to offer them. And also you've thought about, why am I offering this to them? Why is it important to them or important to me? What sincerely is my purpose here? Usually if people have stage fright, they go into a presentation with the purpose of not making a fool of themselves, right? Or, or impressing, being, one or the other, but it's about evaluating their own experience or evaluating their own performance. The trick, in my view, is to get to the place where you can actually be 100% of your bandwidth, your mental bandwidth, is going toward offering someone something that is of value to them, or is useful to them, or is entertaining to them, so that you're not so self-absorbed, but your focus is on your audience and what it is that you're offering to them.
Yeah, so you mentioned also written a book. So
Mhm.
what can I find in your book? What kind of useful information I can apply to my speech giving ability, and to enhance my ability to to speak on stage and to be eloquent and encompassing to all the people.
The book is written like a workshop in a sense. So it takes you through a self-evaluation of what are your symptoms, where do they show up, what is it that's really going on, taking you through the physiology of what, not in depth, but the
Yeah,
physiology of what's going on in your system, so you have a more objective understanding of it. And then takes you through myriad ways to create safety for your brain, not safety necessarily for yourself, because you are already safe, but that your brain is perceiving the situation as a safe situation. And then I teach something called the rapid relief process. It's a set of mind-body exercises that does what I was mentioning before. It doesn't just let you manage your stage fright, which is what most people talk about, but it disconnects that fight, flight, or freeze response so that you don't feel those symptoms. And then you have a lot more bandwidth to put toward your purpose of being there, instead of being all tangled up in your own concerns. And the rapid relief process is outlined in the book, but I also have videos that go with the book. And I also teach a class, a free class, so that people can learn the rapid relief process. So it's a book. Yes, it's a book, but it isn't just a read the book. It's a very much an interactive process. Even though people can't do private coaching with me necessarily, although that certainly is a quicker way, to get to the bottom of it. But it does help people go through the process themselves of changing their energetic response to the situation, so that they don't have that fight, flight, or freeze response anymore.
yeah. So I want to thank you so much for this lovely conversation. I'm sure I'll come up with different topics to speak with you in the future, if you're willing. And
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Marty.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for watching, and have a nice day. Bye.